I just have a couple thoughts on this.
I was going to say, you sound like you're about to defend him, Andy.
I like to hear this. Andy's going to give a demurral.
I'm going to. I'm not going to take it. Welcome to Real Clear Politics for Wednesday, October 29th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So Hurricane Melissa has now left Jamaica. More than 500,000 people are without power. The destruction is widespread. President Donald Trump said from Air Force One that the U.S. is prepared to move. So, Carl, this is the first major natural disaster in the Caribbean since the Trump administration dismantled USAID, which up until now would have been the central mechanism in our response. So does that change anything, and do you think the U.S. will respond?
Well, the president said he would respond. He sort of volunteered it. You say it's the first natural disaster since he dismantled USAID. It's also the first disaster in the Caribbean since he was president the first time. And you remember he went down there and it looked like his instincts seemed humanitarian and solid, and he was getting positive press. And then
this was Haiti, right?
This was Puerto Rico. San Juan. It was
Puerto Rico. I'm sorry. You're right. Yeah.
And he got in a spat with the mayor of Puerto Rico and ended up sort of tossing her some paper towels, and it just wasn't. And it was one of those things that took on a life of its own, like when George W. Bush flew over Katrina and then dropped his plane down. Again, his instinct was to see disaster so he would be able to, know what he was dealing with. But sometimes these symbols, they become the issue. And then Trump's in a spat, and once he's in a spat, he doesn't want to help you. And so I think that this is an opportunity for him to, take command of the narrative and do what he wants. And he doesn't need USAID to help if he wants to help. You'll remember also when W was president, he sent the 7th Fleet to help in that horrifying tsunami that killed all those people. I mean, we've got an aircraft carrier in the region. he could take it back north from Venezuela back up to Jamaica. It's not far, and use it for immediate humanitarian relief, which is what people are going to need. Water in the next few days. So this is an opportunity. Whether he'll take it or not, I don't know.
Yeah, Tom, Carl raises the question of the aircraft carrier. It does seem like we have about half of our Navy sort of deployed right offshore there in the Caribbean. Should we redeploy some of those assets to help out in this humanitarian crisis?
Sure. I mean, I think we should, and I think we probably will. And ever since Katrina, natural disasters have been viewed through a political lens because it was so devastating to George W. Bush's approval rating, and the country sort of you remember they had the telethons with Kanye West saying George W. Bush doesn't like black people and all of this stuff. It was all politicized, racialized, in a really sort of negative way. And George W. Bush kind of, he didn't help matters. You're doing a great job, heck of a job, Brownie, and that kind of stuff. But ever since then, every time there's not only natural disaster, but anything, it's like, is it so-and-so's Katrina, right? It's become the metaphor for like the political disaster. But as far as actual natural disasters go, I don't know that any of them have mattered. Even the one that Carl talks about, Trump got terrible coverage on the Puerto Rico when he went down to San Juan. And I would argue that I think the mayor actually picked the fight with Trump, and he initially, Carl, if I remember that correctly, that may not be, but
yeah, no, that's I stand corrected if that's the case. I wasn't trying to assign blame. I was trying to say that
anyway. But the point is,
it can be done better.
He got terrible coverage of that, and that didn't really end up affecting him, one way or the other. And so, Joe Biden, we had this terrible natural disaster in Western North Carolina, and the Biden administration completely, dropped the ball on that, whether it was intentional or unintentional. And that didn't really seem to hurt him or have some sort of significant
Kamala
impact.
Harris did not carry the state of North Carolina. It may have hurt the Democrats, Tom.
Maybe.
But I would look at, but we don't necessarily need to talk about it through that lens, whether Donald Trump's
I'm just saying, I hope we do respond, but I just don't.
How about doing the right thing?
Carl, that's what I was going to say at the end. It's like, because it doesn't, I don't know that Trump looks at these things through a political lens, because I don't think he really cares, and it hasn't hurt him before. So I think he's just going to do what he thinks is right. And I think we all agree that, if we can help, we should help.
Yeah, I know this is just a pet theory of mine, but it seems Americans like Jamaica, I think, and I think that they will be happy that we're helping out the Jamaica.
Andy, where that hit in Montego Bay, I was there in January, and it's a beautiful place. Played golf there, visited a friend. It's a wonderful place, and the people are amazing. And I'm getting texts. I had to silence my phone. I've been getting texts all day long from people. Have you heard from this person or that person? And the destruction was so immediate, and all the power was out. There's a lot of guesswork. You haven't seen as much footage out of there as you'd hope, because they're having trouble even getting cameras there. So my heart goes out to those people, and I hope the president does us proud.
And it's going to be a multi-year rebuilding effort. If we've seen from other hurricanes in the Caribbean, the devastation, it lasts. I mean, I'm sure, Carl, when you had family in Puerto Rico at the time, I mean, it took them years to rebuild. I'm not sure things are even all the way back to normal there.
Well, even in here, Katrina, New Orleans has never recovered the population it had before. A lot of those people went to Houston and Baton Rouge. It can be a generation. So you're right, Tom. The needs are going to be great.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. I'm looking for that aircraft carrier to turn around and start steaming towards Jamaica any minute now, especially
if he does it.
After the White House listens to this podcast, how can they resist, right?
Well, would you guys start calling me, well, not Admiral Cannon, but at least Commodore Cannon if he does it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right. We'll be back with more right after these words. Guys, we're learning more about Arctic frost. That's the FBI investigation into election interference in the 2020 election. According to the House Judiciary Committee, FBI agents actually targeted more than 160 Republican operatives and lawmakers in what the committee is calling an aggressive effort to, quote, take down President Trump and his supporters. So, Tom, this investigator started under Chris Wray. When he was FBI director, was taking over Special Counsel Jack Smith. This is a wider net than was previously reported. What have we learned about the investigation so far, and how is the Trump administration responding to this?
Look, this is when we first learned sort of the tip of the iceberg here, that 8 Republican senators were spied on, and people say, oh, they weren't spied on. People were just looking at their metadata on their phones to see who they were talking to. They weren't actually listening in on them. That's a distinction almost without a difference. But now we've learned that it was much deeper, wider, broader, and that this included all organizations, including the RNC and Turning Point USA and others. I mean, basically anybody who was in Trump's orbit and one of Trump's, had any sort of political influence. This investigation was opened in April of 2022. Merrick Garland was the Attorney General. So, for all of the people who have been losing their minds over Trump, quote unquote, weaponizing the Justice Department and the FBI to go after his enemies, once again, there's evidence that before, say what you want about Trump, but he didn't start this. Joe Biden actually started it, and Joe Biden's administration started it. And it's astonishing. And I'm sure there's more to this story, and we're going to learn it. But man, it is really, it's unsettling.
Yeah. I mean, Carl, people said when we learned about the 8 senators that this was worse than Watergate. Someone on the Hill said that. 160 Republican operatives and politicians, including the vice president, I guess, were part of this investigation. Is this starting to look like a serious abuse of power in your view?
Well, yeah, it is. And, Tom said it started in Biden's administration. Well, using the FBI for nefarious political purposes began in the 30s with J. Edgar Hoover. This is in the FBI's DNA, and they have to figure out a way to change that culture. I don't know that Kash Patel can accomplish it in a few months. This is the organization that spied on Martin Luther King, and had a campaign going to try and get him to commit suicide, or to blackmail him. And so, these abuses go back. There was you remember this, Andy? There was the Church Commission that looked at the CIA and the FBI, and there were these rules put in effect. And if the FBI is looking for foreign influence in an election, which is if that's the proximate cause, if that turns out to be a fig leaf, and they were really just spying on Republicans, well, that's not legal. That's not allowed under the FBI charter. If they were really serious about looking and trying to determine whether there was Russian influence or Chinese or Iranian influence, and even if you give them the most charitable view of it, it looks like it went too far afield. So I think this is a hell of a story. I don't want to compare it to Watergate yet, but we should not just talk about it once. We should pay attention to this and stay on this and see where this goes.
Well, the president wants to have people keep talking about it. He has said that he thinks Jack Smith should be thrown in prison.
That's not quite how our system works.
Well, but Tom, I was interested in Smith's reply. He said he wants to testify. This came from his attorney, I think. Given the many mischaracterizations of Mr. Smith's investigation into President Trump's alleged mishandling of classified documents and role in attempting to overturn the results of the 2020 election, Mr. Smith respectfully requests the opportunity to testify in open hearings before the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. So he's ready to go into the lion's den. What do you make of that?
Well, okay, let's do that. I mean, the investigation was opened over this fake electors. They considered it a fraud, and Trump and his group were conspiring to submit fake electors to try and overturn the 2020 election. And so let's have Jack Smith testify and let's hear his side of the story, because my understanding of the details, and again, we're learning more about this, I'm not sure how much of a basis there was to start this investigation in the first place. And I'd like to hear from other people who are more expert about this than I am. Was the FBI coloring within the lines here, or was this something that they should have been doing and they were acting in a political way and going outside of their normal authority to specifically target Donald Trump and his network? And basically, at this point, again, April of 2022, this investigation starts. Donald Trump is already, I think, running for president, or, it was already pretty clear that he was considering it very heavily and was probably going to run for president. So viewed in that context, this is an effort to basically try and stop him from running for president and put all of his, all of the organizations that are helping to try and get him elected in 2024 to investigate them and prosecute them and put them in jail as well. And so that to me sounds like an abuse of power. But if Jack Smith wants to defend it, sure, let's have him. Let's hear his side of it.
Well, we heard part of his side of it with that indictment that he issued.
Right.
He released the indictment. He got a grand jury to go along with it. It lays out the case for why he thinks that Trump violated federal law, election interference, which he doesn't, the specific statute he cited had never been used quite like this before. And I read that at the time and wrote about it. And it was a very political. It was a political document. I don't know that Jack Smith intended it that way. He was trying to show Trump's state of mind, but he had this long section where he writes about people who told Trump that the election was on the up and up, and that the indictment says that because he ignored that, because Trump ignored that, it proves he was lying. He was cynical. He knew he lost the election. He was trying to do something nefarious or illegal, claim he lost an election, that he won an election he knew he lost. But the indictment was peculiar in that way because it never mentioned all the people who were telling Trump he really did win the election. Right. And if you were doing a fair report of it and you were really trying to ascertain Trump's state of mind, you'd have both arguments. But he's a litigator and he's an advocate, and he marshaled this case. But I think two things can be true at the same time. And in Tom, I assume you'll agree with me. One is, it is unsustainable to have a candidate, a major party candidate running for national election, or a whole political party who won't accept the results of an election and basically say that they won't before the election's even been held. That's what Donald Trump did. But to make that that's a political argument I've just made, a civics argument. That doesn't make it a crime. And I always thought it was overreach by the FBI to take what I considered boorish, even destabilizing behavior, and make it into a federal crime. I wasn't, and Tom, once they start thinking of it in terms of a crime, then, well, who are the participants in the crime? Well, all these elected office holders, all these senators and congressmen, the RNC. So I think the FBI and Jack Smith, I always thought they went off the rails at the very beginning when they tried to criminalize behavior that I personally found
disagree
reprehensible.
I don't disagree with that at all, but I'd love to hear Jack Smith try. Now that we didn't know any of that when he released his report, and now we're learning more about what they actually did and who they targeted and who they were investigating. Let's have him defend that. And to your point about, not accepting election results, there are plenty of Democrats who said the same thing about 2024 in advance of it. There are plenty of Democrats right now saying that Trump and the Republicans are trying to steal the 2026 election, sort of preemptively, casting doubt on the outcome there. So this has become, unfortunately, a regular feature of our politics for both sides. This is not unique to Donald Trump.
I agree with you, Tom, but that doesn't make, and I think
doesn't make it a crime.
Right. Doesn't make it a crime.
Yeah.
Not good for the country, but doesn't make it a crime.
Right. Guys, one thing we learned from the House investigation into former President Joe Biden's use of the auto pen is that there was at least one of his advisors heavily incented to keep Joe in the race, and that is Mike Donilon, who told investigators he was going to receive a $4 million bonus if Biden won re-election. So, Carl, I'm not sure it was Donilon's job to get Biden out of the race, but it does seem like he had 4 million pretty good reasons to try to keep him in. What do you make of that revelation?
Well, he admitted it, but boy, he didn't volunteer it, did he? It was like pulling teeth. And, there's this video, you can find it on the interwebs if you're curious about it. And he was asked, these various questions. And it's like the investigator either had heard this rumor or stumbled upon it, but
Axios actually reported it in, I think, July of last year. I saw.
Right, and she said, was there an incentive depending on the outcome of the race? And he says something. Well, the outcome of the race, and he's like,
what do you mean?
Yeah, he's stalling. Right. He's stalling for time, and I don't mean that in any bad way. He's taking this very seriously, and I'm inferring that he's sitting there having a conversation with himself. And we talked about this among ourselves. When you're subpoenaed before the House in this context, hostile subpoena from a party that hates you and wants to see you in trouble, you have 4 options. You can just ignore the subpoena. And if Congress has the stones, they'll track you down and cite you for contempt.
Throw you in jail like Peter Navarro.
Yeah, yeah. Or you
march you through DCA and leg irons.
Yeah, or you can show up and take the Fifth Amendment, like 14 of these people did, including to this question: were you asked to lie about the president's health? Or you can take the Fifth Amendment. You can commit perjury, and the fourth option is you can tell the truth and make yourself look bad. And Donilon his options had narrowed. He'd showed up, he hadn't taken the fifth, and then he's asked this question. And you see on his face, he does not want to commit perjury, and he kind of mumbles this number, 4 million. Yeah, 4 million after 30 seconds. Painful thing to watch here. But to the original point, Andy, you're talking about, we've heard from these people, a few of them, the loyalists, they thought Biden was treated rudely by the Democratic Party establishment, including this, this former press secretary who's written her alleged book. But now you've got something, an incentive. If Joe Biden stays in the race, even if he quits the presidency on January 24th, you get $4 million. And that creates a perverse incentive, doesn't it? To put yourself ahead of party and to put yourself ahead of the country. And I had lunch today with a Democratic political consultant who was astonished by that figure. There are sometimes bonuses, but they're in the thousands. $4 million, that's obscene. It created.
Well, can we just also point out that that's a $4 million bonus on top of the $4 million salary that he was receiving or going to receive for being part of the campaign. So we're talking about $8 million that this guy was going to potentially receive if Joe Biden ran again and won again.
If they prop up Joe Biden and somehow get him across the finish line.
You want to talk about like an indictment of the system, a grift, a system that is so skewed toward, and you find yourself in this situation. It's no, and look, Mike Donald was one of Joe Biden's longtime inner circle, most trusted advisors. Like when they were in the bunker, he was one of the three people that were in there with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and Dr. Jill. So
Yeah, okay.
you have to
fair
just
enough.
shake
Okay.
your head at the craziness of this.
All right. I just have a couple thoughts on this.
I was going to say, you sound like
Andy,
you're about to defend him, Andy.
I like to hear this.
I-
Andy's going to give a demurral.
I'm going to. I am not going to take the fifth. Look, $4 million is a lot of money, but if he negotiated $4 million from himself and people thought he was worth it, I mean, who are we to say that winning the presidency isn't worth an extra $4 million? So people should be incented to do a good job. I'm as someone who has been in the private sector my whole life, I think that incentives work, and that was quite an incentive. Also, I don't, I think we're being a little tough on these staffers. I don't think it's
Bonus baby Walworth.
right. Yeah. Well, I'm looking for my my bonus at the end of this year, but I don't think people who work in these campaigns, they're not the people that we should be looking to tell us whether or not someone should or shouldn't run. I mean, it's almost like family. I give them sort of a pass. I think that, unless they really thought that, he was truly on death's door or something, or that he was, nefarious in some ways, you can make an argument, but that he had gotten old and was slowing down. I think the press has a role there. I think other politicians might have a role there. I think the Democratic Party has a role there. But I sort of give the staffers a little bit of a pass on this because that's just not their job.
With the Karine Jean-Pierre defense. He's just getting old and slowing down. Nobody said he wasn't doing that,
I am just saying that
But
it's
Andy,
not their judgment is not the most important.
But Andy,
judgment.
there's a precedent for this, and it turned out all right. Unless you lived in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, I guess. But Franklin Roosevelt ran for a fourth term, and he was dying, and he wasn't truthful about his health, even to himself. And they missed. And we were in the middle of a war. This is the commander in chief of the United States Armed Forces. This is the president of the United States. Andy, we have a right to know their health. We have a right to know their mental cognition. We have a right as Americans to know all of this.
I absolutely
agree. Anybody who covered up has something to answer for.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
All right. Well, I will not cede the point. I think that there are plenty of people who do have to answer, and I think these people shouldn't have taken the fifth. I think that was a big mistake. I say give them immunity, especially as doctor.
Give them immunity?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's right. Then we can find out the truth.
So we can find out the truth, and then, but again, I think that we're
that'll hold them accountable for any wrongdoing. By the way, I would love to know the details of who negotiated this contract and how it got negotiated.
They already have pardons.
That's a good point too.
For all we know, Mike Donald was, slid this paper in front of Joe Biden, was like, "Hey, Joe, just sign this," but Joe's like, look, "Oh, $8 million. Good for you, Mike." He may not have even known what he was doing.
If Oprah Winfrey got $1 million to do a town hall, who's to say that $4 million for a guy who's going to work through the whole campaign? Maybe it's worth it. Anyway, you guys,
the love of money is the root of all evil.
Well, all right, guys. I can see I'm not getting anywhere with this line of argument, but I'm sure on the YouTube and on our apps, people will weigh in on this, and
I'm
let
sure
me
they
know
will.
I'm right. Okay, so remember, I do read the comments. Anyway, we'll be back with more right after this. Guys, the redistricting wars continue. There is news out of my home state of Maryland, and that is that the lone Republican in the entire Maryland delegation, Andy Harris, is safe for now. They will not try to gerrymander the state any further than it already is. And there's been a setback in Virginia where the attorney general, who happens to be running for office, is up for election in 7 days, but says the current House of Delegates cannot amend the state constitution. Tom, what do you make of this? Are there sort of more roadblocks in the way to this sort of big redistricting than people may have thought?
Not necessarily. I mean, look, the decision in Virginia was based on Miaris's reading of, right, because Virginia holds their elections on off years. So they're going to have an election in 2025, and the next election isn't until 2027. That's after 2026. So he's saying, look, you can't get this done and get it on the ballot in time for the quote unquote midterms. So I don't know that that has dampened the fire among Democrats in California or anywhere else to push ahead with this. I mean, the Maryland thing is interesting, but that was only one seat anyway, so it wasn't like going to be a huge win. I think Democrats are still pushing forward in these other states. Certainly in my home state of Illinois, they're moving forward and going to, everybody seems to be, with the exceptions that we just talked about, still moving forward with the maximalist strategy, trying to gerrymander the crap out of all of these states.
The whole country.
You see it that way, Carl?
Well, yeah, and you already mentioned Maryland. I think, what is it, 8-1 there? They have 9, or is it 7-1?
Oh, in Maryland?
Yeah, they have.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so in Massachusetts, now here's a state that elected a Republican governor 2 terms, Larry Hogan. Now it's a Democratic state. Trump didn't get, he got a few votes there. You're disenfranchising Republicans. Massachusetts, every single Republican in the state is disenfranchised. The delegation's 8 Democrats, 0 Republicans. California now wants to is trying to. Governor Newsom is leading an effort to disenfranchise, 5 or 6 million Republican voters. You'll have a state more than 40 million people, and they want there to be 4 or 5 Republicans out of a delegation of 53. So it's just it's grotesque, and they're blaming Texas. Okay, but California's been gerrymandering since before Governor of Texas was born. So this is not a new phenomenon. But the Supreme Court has been very reluctant to do anything about it because it's politics. You can make a challenge based on race. If you're disenfranchising a racial group, you'll face scrutiny, with or without the Voting Rights Act. The Congress, the Supreme Court they will weigh in. They've been very reluctant to do anything about disenfranchising conservatives or liberals. But these gerrymanders are so grotesque. The Supreme Court may have to get involved. They may not even be able to avoid it anymore because, and in the Democrats' case, it's Orwellian. Under the guise of saving democracy, you are behaving in a way that you don't really believe in democracy. You don't actually want the other party to even have any say at all.
Barack Obama disagrees with you, Carl.
Yeah, I saw that.
He's all in favor of Prop 50.
Yeah.
Tom, are you surprised that
he's never lived in California? I was born and raised there. I just assume he not meddle.
But Tom, are you surprised that Prop 50 has done as well, or looks like it's going to do as well in California as it is? When we started talking about this, I remember we discussed the fact that, and we had polls at the time showing that people liked the idea that it was a nonpartisan board that was doing the gerrymandering, still, because it was still gerrymandered, but it was at least a little bit cleaner than what we're going to have now. And California seemed to like that. It was kind of a good government argument. But that's by the boards now. I mean, these new polls that we've been seeing show, 55, 60% of the state favors Prop 50 at this point.
Well, that's what happens when you put millions and millions and millions of dollars behind advertising and organizing in a state that is, 2/3 Democrat, basically, right? They've moved the needle on Democrats who initially thought, this doesn't sound like a good idea, but Barack Obama and Gavin Newsom keep telling him it's a great idea and it has to be done. We're doing this to save democracy. Don't you want to save democracy? Democrats in California, and of course, we want to save it, so we're going to vote yes on Prop 50. So I'm not totally shocked that Democrats were able to move the needle on this a little bit. We'll see what happens in the end, but it's a blue state, and we live in a very partisan time. And so when people, start appealing to your partisan lizard brain, it usually works.
Carl, this is a big feather in the cap for Gavin Newsom. Is this going to be a sort of a big victory when he gets this, if he gets this?
If this passes, Newsom's going to get the credit for it. And my guess is he was reluctant to get involved in this. But that's like that old Pogo cartoon, right? You guys watching?
Really? You thought he was reluctant? I didn't get that sense at all.
Or maybe it's Thomas Nast. But the old line, there's a crowd going by, and
that's Pogo,
say, there they go. I must follow them, for I am their leader. That's what's happened here. And it's, J.B. Pritzker doesn't ever need any help. His mind automatically goes to the grift. He's kind of one of those guys. You give him, 6 choices, he'll take the most hyper partisan one automatically. Newsom's not necessarily the same. This has become this has become
Oh,
this
God.
has be this has become a litmus test in the Democratic Party, and you're not seeing any Democrats and people we respect, good government people. Tom's going to mention Fetterman any minute now, but you're just not seeing party leaders stand up and say, well, wait a minute, we know this is wrong. We don't want to behave like Texas. You're not seeing anybody say that. So with that said, I don't think it'll be a feather in his cap as much as it's just a hurdle you have to get over if you're a Democrat.
Tom, last word.
I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see, what the people are. There's only one poll that matters. That's on election day. We'll see what the people of California say on this. I'm not going to be surprised if it passes. I'm not going to be surprised if this is, a badge of honor that Gavin Newsom wears into the 2028 race, which he's almost all but admitted to. I don't agree with Carl. I don't think he was very reluctant about this at all. I think he was. He may have been nudged into it, but I think once he saw that's where the wind was blowing, he happily, trimmed his sails in that direction, and he's been out in front ever since.
All right. Well, guys, it's only 6 days away. 6 days to election. So
When it's done, we can quote another California Democrat, Dick Tuck, who coined a great aphorism: "The people have spoken, the bastards."
all right. On that note, we're going to leave it. You've been listening to Real Clear Politics. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. We'll be back tomorrow. See you then.